So I'm here with Alex McCorner. He's a filmmaker behind a documentary that's in competition at our International Film Festival, the epic Voyage of the Jubilee Hope. Thank you very much for joining us. Congratulations.
My pleasure.
Now, obviously, I know the story, but if you could give us a brief synopsis of this film.
Well, the story is about a 9,000-mile journey from Edinburgh in Scotland to Lake Victoria. Now, in Africa, which is one of the biggest lakes in the world, I believe. And
we should explain it's landlocked as well, isn't it?
It's landlocked, yes. I was just going to say you might find that very strange. So the idea was to sail the ship around the Cape of Africa, and up through the notorious pirate waters made famous by Captain Phillips, up to Mombasa, where the ship was going to be dismantled and split into two halves, the upper structure and the lower structure, set out on a 96-wheel trailer and hauled over land for about roughly 600 miles to the lake, to the Tanzanian end of the lake, where it was going to be restructured again, and it's now, I'm pleased to say, a working medical ship on the lake, the only working medical ship on the lake. There was no previous arrangements for any of the countries surrounding the lakes to supply the islands. So the islanders were virtually abandoned out there. And there's a sad story behind the situation in the islands as well, and why the boat was required to be there. And that is that it's one of the islands out there, and there's quite a number of them, about nearly 500, I believe. The islands in the lake have become a safety net, or a safety net is probably the wrong word, but a last staging post, if you like, for women who are fleeing from the mainland countries to escape the stigma of AIDS. So that was the principal reason originally for the need to send the little boat out there to work the lake with volunteers from the UK, doctors, nurses, consultants, whatever. Also, another tragic fact is that practically 5,000 fishermen who work the lake drown every year because of the poor quality of the boats that they have to work with, and the dangerous currents that exist in the lake. So they have a fatalistic attitude to life, and therefore the consequence of that is that the AIDS epidemic spreads much more rapidly. So the whole of that part of the world is a humanitarian disaster area. To think actually that there's only one medical ship on the whole of the lake in circumstances like that is amazing, I think. However, that's only the end of the part of the story. The story that we've told is about the journey, the epic journey.
Yeah, it is an epic, incredible journey.
To get there. And setting off in one of the worst winters in recent history. bound, tied up in port for 6 weeks in Torquay to start with. That was only the beginning. They did try to forge ahead, but they were forced by the weather to turn back in high seas. So they just had to sit there and wait until a weather window opened up, and then they set out. And of course, you've still got areas of the world that are still pretty dangerous around the west coast of Europe, and they had to go through that dilemma, if you like, as well. They caught up. All sorts of things happened to them. A fishing net got caught at the stern and could have wrapped itself around the propeller shaft, but fortunately they could not. It didn't happen because they had to move on at some speed. If they had stopped that, then the net perhaps would have attached itself with very dangerous consequences. Who knows what could have happened out there if that had happened.
But how did you, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking, that I've obviously got a huge amount of projects you've been involved in, shorts, narrative, features, documentaries, but so I'm guessing you're asked a lot to look at different projects.
Yes. But
a bit of a silly question, but what drew you to, why did you decide to get involved in this one in particular?
Well, it started off in 2001 when a gentleman called Willie McPherson, who runs a charity called the Vine Trust in Edinburgh, came to me to say that he was planning to send the first of those boats across the Atlantic and 2,000 miles down the Amazon to Peru to operate on the in the remote areas of the Amazon, taking medicine to those remote areas instead of the inhabitants having to travel to the big cities and becoming embroiled in trying to find work and trying to make a life in the big cities. At least medicine would come to them, and they would be able to enjoy the benefits of medicine without having been desperate enough to travel by canoe for thousands of miles to get to one of the big cities. So I became involved at that stage and was involved in that trip, which was a hugely rewarding experience. It's so much so that I got involved in a second trip in 2008. And when Willie came up with the third boat called the Jubilee Hope,
so no hesitation, you were just in straight away?
I was just, I didn't need to ask me again, but we still had to figure out how we were going to raise the budget and how we were going to finance it. And
the whole project you're talking about?
The whole project, yeah. I mean, the whole film actually cost no more than 40 grand. The whole, that's a feature-length movie, and that was all we could raise, so that's what we had to do it for.
And how do you, when you've got such a busy schedule, because I know again, I know from looking at your resume, you've got things coming up. How would you plan this into that? Would you say, well, okay, I've got, I don't know, 6-month window in 2017, and this is what we can do? How does that all kind of work?
Well, I think filmmaking in general, I don't think you necessarily stop one day and then 3 months later you finish and you've worked on nothing else. You balance everything together. You know, I'm working on about 3 films at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a bit old for that, but
I think it's Brad Pitt that says filmmaking is a young man's game.
Yeah. Well, I think he's right. But I love it. You know, I love it. It's a great job. There's no better job in the world. You know, it takes you everywhere, gets you into all sorts of scrapes, and it gives you something to talk about at dinner parties as well.
I always see it as like this same with any filmmaker. I mean, they always kind of frame it as almost kind of like an addiction, and it's interesting.
It is an addiction.
Yeah. Jack Lawrence, the cinematographer, to be fair, the guy behind pretty much everything you see in fact.
Yes. Oh yeah, I can't praise Jack enough. I mean, for a young lad just out of film school to even contemplate taking on this task was amazing. You know, thank goodness.
But I assume you could have called on any number of people that you knew from the film industry.
Yeah.
What made you think I want to get someone?
I mean, it's pretty basic, really. I needed someone who was just starting out, who had, in fact, 3 or 4 months to spare. Yeah. Because most of the usual cameramen that I use are 2 or 3 days in this, 2 or 3 days in that, unless they're on a feature film or something like that. They're not on a long-term contract with people. They work days and get paid days, you know. So I needed someone who was going to be available and who had a sense of adventure. Jack, among loads of young guys who sent me their CVs and what I got a great sense that this was something that Jack would rise to, and I got a sense from what he wrote in his various emails that he wasn't a quitter. And that appealed to me as well. And so I said, right, well, come up to Glasgow and we'll have a chat. And when he arrived in Glasgow, I met him at Central Station, and he told me that he'd been sick on the way up on the train. I immediately plunged into despair, thinking, oh dear, I've made a mistake. But we went out for dinner, and during the course of that occasion, it became clear to me that Jack actually was the right choice and the right man for the job, and started to feel more confident. But what says more for Jack, I think, was that he was going to have no on-set direction, as it were, because he had to become a member of the crew, and the crew was very restricted for space. Consequently, Jack was the only person who could go with the equipment, which he had to keep to an absolute minimum as well. You know, he had to share a bunk with other members of the crew, and he had to muck in with the daily tasks as well as the task of making the film. So it was not an easy experience for him. Yeah, no, I pitched it as an adventure, and I knew that some young lad somewhere was going to think, oh yeah, he's right, you know, it is a bit of an adventure. Yeah. This would do my CV no ill at all.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, that's how I pitched it, as a trip of a lifetime.
And you point, I know, again, we'll talk about this earlier, but you were actually directing this remotely. That's the truth.
Yes, that's right. I'd been in 2 trips myself, and so I knew what to expect, and I could brief Jack pretty well. But I mean, still, you know, he's the man on the location, and he has to make the decisions. But the only way we could do it actually is to take advantage of the knowledge that we had that would keep us in touch. And we knew that because of time restraints there would be changes of crew along the route, and that those members of crew who were being changed over would be coming back to the UK. So we made sure he had the facilities to transfer all his material onto hard drives. So we had several hard drives with him to send back at various points, and large hard drives, 2K hard drives, 2 terabyte, right? I mean hard drives. The hard drives came back. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stops along the route.
Yes.
So 6 times hard drives came back to me from various ports of call, and I could ingest those, look at the rushes, and get back to Jack if I thought that he was, veering in the wrong direction, or could perhaps pick up some stuff that was missing that we would obviously need in the edit. But to be perfectly honest, there wasn't all that much. I mean, I did pass on several tips, but there wasn't really that much to do because the guy was so good.
But what is amazing is you're frankly building a film. You're not there. You've got to trust him to do, and obviously brought it to the table. So, is the finished product, finished film? You've got no real idea. Did it exceed your expectations?
Oh, I think absolutely, because this was a guy who was born to make films, and I think he would, given the proper opportunities, would go on to a glittering career. That's at least what I would hope.
Oh no,
so I mean, you can always tell, where emerging talent. It's like Jack's. I think is actually few and far between, to be honest. To have an instinctive feel for what the film is going to look like, and what he needs to do to get a story in the can, as well as be a cabin boy at the same time, tells you everything you need to know, really. It's a fantastic job.
And just finally, a sequel to this?
Yes, I think so, because there is this huge humanitarian issue in Lake Victoria, and I think it's a story that hasn't been told, to be perfectly frank. Don't think. And of course we want to see it's great seeing the ship or the little boat going out there to start in its career on the lake, and it has seen about 200,000 patients since it's gone out there. I mean, that's remarkable in itself. But I don't think that story's ever been told, you know, and it's a huge humanitarian issue. And I think it's just sitting there waiting for a storyteller to come along and bring it to the attention of the British public, or even an international public. You know, I think it's so that's the ambition, and that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to try and get out there and make that film.